you got to understand, you'll go down this journey, you're going to run into problems, and you got to have faith that you'll know how to fix it. If you don't believe in yourself, how would you ever do that?
So let's pretend that this episode, say a few years from now, maybe 10 years, 20 years from now, let's say your son will be listening to this episode. What are some life rules, 3, 5, depending how many you want to share, that you would want him to hear at the age of, say, 20, at the age of 16, life rules that you feel would be extremely helpful?
I would say, number one, believe in the way you feel and believe in your gut and believe in what you see. And don't force the saying. Don't see what you want to see what's actually there. And I'll just give you an example. I think that the people in relationships show you who they are very early on. Like back when I was dating, if I think about what happened on the first or second date, that was pretty much what happened later, probably in a more intense version. Like if someone was fairly rude, they were only going to get worse, or at least be that rude. And, to my mistake, more than a handful of times, I would date a woman because maybe she was just, I found her really attractive. And so I'd overlook those things. And I found out later, no, it actually was that and worse. And it didn't change. But what was interesting was I could see it from the beginning. It's just I chose to ignore it because I had a different agenda. And I think often in life, not only in dating relationships, business relationships, it's all there for you to see, but at your own peril, you choose to ignore it. And I just think, try to see the truth and accept the truth, even if it's not what you want to see. Like, again, I think as young men, especially, very vulnerable to good-looking women. Like, good-looking women can make a man's brain completely stop working. And, but you just realize you're getting sometimes not something good on the inside. And you'll know if you choose to see. And I think it's the same thing with business deals. One business deal I can think of in particular, it's a commercial real estate that I own to this day, and it's been a terrible investment since I got it. So a guy called, and he was a good friend of mine, had been very successful in real estate. And he said, I want to buy this commercial building, blah, 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 blah. He had done 2 other projects just like it. They both worked out really well. And I was making a lot of money at the time. He's like, do you want to be in? It's 50 grand. I'm like, yeah, whatever. It wasn't a lot of money at the time. But when he called, I had this feeling in my stomach, like it just clenched up. And I was very busy, had a lot of money. So I just threw some in. And this thing's been like a piece of tape stuck on my finger since then. I can't get rid of it. Just waste my time. It's always like capital calls. I could waste more money on the project. I'm like, this is just so stupid. And I just realized my gut told me to be careful, and I ignored it. I was too busy. I was just like, whatever, just throw 50 grand. It doesn't matter. I was careless. And again, I didn't look to see what it was or ask questions about the project. And I saw an interview with, of all people, George Soros, who's not one of my socially favorite people, but a very smart investor. So I'll take him for that. And that's one of his first rules, is the gut feel. If your gut has a problem, trust it and run. And I was like, oh, something to that. And again, I think for me, it's a matter of see the truth in everything, seek to see the truth, and don't disregard it. And I would say that to my son, like, you need to trust your own judgment, but don't force it. Don't try to make it something it's not, because it's a big mistake. And in my life, those have been the most costly mistakes. And I had a divorce that lasted 7 years and pretty much drained all the cash I had at the time. It's horrible. 7-year divorce with no children. But that system.
7-year divorce. 7.
It was like a plague of locusts. Don't they last 7 years or something? So,
wow.
It's horrible. But
what about marriage rules? Since you went through a divorce.
So I would say that when you're dating someone, the first thing to do is talk about things that really matter to you. Like, let's say, like, I like let's just speaker named Dennis Prager that I think is just great. I think his stuff's brilliant. So, I'm reading a book by Dennis right now. And if I started talking about the Dennis Prager book and how much I love what he talks about and all this stuff, if I got like a blank look, like when I talked about reading a book, or just no interest at all, I'd be like, oh, this person probably doesn't have the same interests as I have, same alignment. And that would definitely be a demerit. And I'd be looking for someone that could really be my best friend. Because I think, I've been with my wife for a long, long time. We were high school sweethearts and we got together later in life, but we've been together now for, I guess, maybe long. It's like 13 years. So it's a long time. And I just found that the relationship matures from, like you just want to devour this person because you're so into them, to this really need to be founded in friendships and common values. And, I see when I'm raising our children, like we're in sync. But what if you're not in sync with things like, oh, should our kid get a COVID vaccine or not? And whatever it is, both of you need to be in sync. And, so for me, it was a no. For her, it was a hard no. And we're like, great. So, but what if it weren't? Where would you be on the other side if your spouse is really pro-vaccine and you're really anti-vaccine? I think with kids especially, things can be so important that, you have unresolvable fights. Like I could take, I didn't get to pick the color of the room that we live in. I don't care, or where dinner is tonight. I'm not going to die on that hill. I don't care. But when it comes to things like how do you raise your kids, which values do you give them? Like I was dating this one girl, and she was absolutely beautiful. And she was like a vision. And she told me one day, she's talking about the suits. I'm like, the suits, what's that? And suits, it turned out, were guys that wore suits to work. And I was a lawyer. I'm like, didn't it occur to her that I'm one of those? And she's just trash talking them. And I was like, oh, this is it. It's over. I mean, she was not the smartest to start with. And that's one of my criteria. But I would say, just make sure that you're really aligned with values and it's someone that you could see as your best friend. On top of the attraction needs to be there. But, if you're married, like I think people that are married 20 and 30 years, the attraction they had when they were dating for the first year is not the same. It's different. You're building a life together and the values become much more important. And let's face it, nobody's as good looking at 50 as they were at 30 or 20, right? So everybody's going to get less attractive and you better like what's on the inside. So I tell them that for sure. The other thing I wanted to just mention to you, I was reading a book on, there's a woman who interviewed 300 entrepreneurs and their parents. And she was trying to figure out like sort of what makes for a successful entrepreneur in parenting. And
what's the book called?
I'm trying to think. It's in my, let me look at my Audible because it's here. Because that's.
A woman interviewed 300 entrepreneur parents.
300 entrepreneurs. I'll get it for you because I'm just going to pull up the Audible app, pull my library. Raising an Entrepreneur.
Okay.
And it's by Margot somebody because I can't, the way that it works, it doesn't show her full name.
Right.
Look up Margot. So what she found universally is that the entrepreneur had someone in their life, usually their mother, but it doesn't have to be, but usually their mother, sometimes a mentor, sometimes the father, who believed in them and told them to believe in themselves and trust themselves. And I find with entrepreneurs who are successful, they do believe in themselves. Like they believe, like when you're talking about, you got to understand, you'll go down this journey, you're going to run into problems, and you got to have faith that you'll know how to fix it. If you don't believe in yourself, how would you ever do that?
That is so true. That is so true.